Hello everyone, welcome to the second lesson of lecture of the Startup Academy Uni, which is supported by our partners, USAID and Sweden government. I'm sorry. And I want to welcome here one of our experts on startups. Maybe some of you know about her, but some of you maybe know about the startup she represented. It's about Saltage, one of the most known startup in Moldova and all around the world. Lisa Gutsu is CEO, and we are happy to see her with us. She will represent the today's lecture about the evaluation of the idea, TAM-SAM-SOM, the competitiveness analysis. And Lisa, maybe you can explore more what is our lesson of today.
Sure.
About.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everybody. So as Mary mentioned, I'm working for Saltage. It's one of the leading fintech startups out of Moldova. We've been there for 7 years now, so hopefully I can bring out and share some good information and useful stuff that I found and also implemented in our companies. And hopefully you would be able to use it to bring up and create your own amazing startup ideas. Let me know if you can see my screen. Yep. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Great.
Is on the screen. So I will be with you back in the backstage and have a good lecture of today.
Amazing. So as Mary mentioned, I will try to focus more on the topics around evaluation of the idea. How can we analyze competitors, and how can we differentiate between product and business competitive analysis and advantages, as well as we will dive into the target markets and differences between them, and also explain these crazy abbreviations, TAM-SAM-SOM, what do they mean and why they are useful for you guys. So as mentioned a bit about me, my expertise is preventively within the fintech industry, so financial technology. I've been doing both B2B, business to business, and before that, I was doing my own startup, Ventury, which was a personal finance management application. I am originally from Moldova, and now I'm living in the UK. Working for our office here, but otherwise I'm happy to help you guys with business development, understanding how to build up your business model, as well as how to arrange and organize your commercial strategy and sales. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn with me or follow me on Twitter. Both options are available. So what does the evaluation of the idea actually mean? Some of you might heard it's pretty much called Lean Canvas. It's a framework that allows you to understand whether the idea you have is actually valid and whether there is a market potential for it. It consists of several specific boxes that you have to complete. In these cases, you could see they're even numbered. So in total, they are 9. And on today's sessions, we'll focus on the first 4 boxes, which would be around the customer segments, meaning how can we identify our ideal target customers and the early adopters. We'll focus as well on kind of product solution fit, and also here we'll focus a lot on analyzing our competitors and understanding what our target audience might need or want, and what potentially would be our unfair advantage compared to them. And we'll touch briefly on the business models and revenue models that exists in the current market, as well as how can we actually monetize our products. All the other chapters that are mentioned here, you would go briefly through the Startup Academy sessions on the later stages. And by the completion of kind of this high-level business canvas, you'd be actually able to understand where or what kind of metrics you'd need, what would be your audiences, what would be your potential value propositions, and based on it, you could actually start building your presentations for investors, or you would actually just high-level understand your business and whether it makes sense or not. All right, just a quick tip. If you have any questions, please write them down so that, or either in the comment box or on a piece of paper so that you can later on ask about it. We'll have a 45-minute Q&A at the end, so you'd have plenty of time to ask and go through specific use cases. And if you already have an idea in mind that you're working on, then just kind of think through the perspective of the prisma of your idea on the information that I will share today, and also see whether there are some specific questions that you didn't understood that relates to your project. So here is, for example, a filled-in canvas that is being done by Uber London in this case, where we can actually see what would be their problem. In this case, it's difficult to find a cab. Mini cabs are very expensive and stuff like that. And then the solution that they came up with, of course, why is their value proposition so unique compared to the current taxis on the market? What is their unfair advantage? More specifically, the customer segments. As you could see, they kind of differentiated between the age groups, and also they also added up the tourists that would come to London and are not aware of the existing taxi routes, as well as the early adopters, which is very important. The early adopters are the first people that will actually use your service and will recommend it to others. So in this case, they've added up the American tourists, so it's going to be in English as an application, which is very easy. And of course, the professionals that need to mingle around the city quite fast, and sometimes the taxis are not available so often. And here, as you can see from the revenue stream, they also differentiated that they would take 25% from the actual cost of route. So this is kind of high-level structure of what you need to create of the end. You can do it. There's plenty of online tools to do it online. But the most important thing that once you complete it, ideally together with your already mini team, at least if you have +1 founder, that's great. If not, you can start doing on its own, but please validate it with someone, because this table will give you a lot of insights and perspective on what you're actually doing, and will help you out to build all the rest of the things, even some products parts at a later stage. So going to the first part of the lean canvas completion, which relates to customer segmentation. We can differentiate customers from various angles, but the kind of main 4 principles of it are the geographical one, meaning where they are coming from, the country, the city, might be even the specific region or zip codes, what kind of language they are speaking, what kind of timetable they might have, climate, and so on and so forth. The second one is demographic. So how old is that person, with gender, if they have a family or not, what is their religious background, education, and so on and so forth. The third one is psychographic, meaning what kind of values do they have, what kind of needs, what kind of hobbies, interests, where they're going normally, and stuff like that. And of course, the last one, what is their kind of behavioral part mainly, which relates to what is their purchasing habits, what kind of brands do they love, if they are a loyal customer or not, and what kind of activities they are normally doing when they are interacting with applications or with webs. So why the information is really important? Because based on it, you can then start thinking of your ideal target audience, and also where they're actually spending their time in each applications, where they are actually allocated, meaning what kind of problems they might have differently compared to other regions. And based on this customer segmentation, you can get a lot of insights on how or what you should do in your marketing campaigns, or where do you actually find your ideal audience and why they would actually interact with you. So when we were doing our customer segmentation, we were just doing on a piece of paper, it would look something like this. So this is, for example, ideal persona that we were building for our money management application some years ago. And what we were trying to understand here is what our ideal customer profile would look like. Here we were taking into consideration quite a lot of factors, but the most important for us was what this customer is their current need, so the current problem, how their, for example, in our case was that in this particular picture is a married woman. She has 2 kids. She needs to manage their family budget, and for her it's very complicated. The second thing was how can we understand how they are currently solving this problem. So we were trying to actually find similar people that we would build up, where we would think of and validate with them whether our ideas were accurate or not. So the current solution that this target audience had was basically to use an Excel file or just basically on the piece of paper to draft their income of the family and their spending pattern, so they would realize how much they should put aside or how much they can spend on their kids. So these were the 2 most critical points for us that we needed to understood. And the third were really the assumptions around what are the habits of that person in online environment, so that we can understand where can we actually find her. Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? How much time does it spend it? Is it more on the morning time slot or in the evening time slot? So when building the ideal customer profile, this information is very valuable, because outside of understanding who would be your first ideal customers, you also get an insight how can you then pitch this product to them, which is very valuable information. So this was kind of the final stage of what we've been doing. Again, really piece and paper type of style workshop, where we identified 4 ideal target audiences for us in different type of segments. So some of them were related to, for example, the postgraduates that have a good job now. They're trying to save for their next amazing trip and they do not have enough money. So again, we're trying to do all this obstacles, issues they have, needs they have, and based on it to actually have a real summary of our perfect target audience that would definitely use our product. And then based on it, we would try to find these people and validate this data with them. I will also share with you the similar thing, but in, let's say, doc format. So here you can actually add up all this data for your particular product. With all the missing information, so that when you kind of start to interact with these people, you can fill in this information with more details. For instance, what alternative digital solutions they are using, which would basically be your competitors, because sometimes you might not be aware of them. And also in this form, it is quite useful, or at least was for us, to even give some names for our ideal target audiences, because sometimes when we build the product and we are founders and we build these products, we strive to build it and impose a lot of ideas that we have in mind as we would build a product for ourselves. However, when you are a founder, you need to always remember that you are building the products for the customers. You are not building your products for yourself. Hence why it is very important at the very beginning stages of the kind of problem, idea, discovery, to actually interact with your ideal target audience and take their ideas and their problems into account rather than your personal. So of course you can add up your own ideas, but you should always validate with your audience, because at the end of the day, they will purchase your product and you are building it for them. So this is something to bear in mind at all the time. Based on these user profiles, ideally you should have at least 2 or 3 ideal user profiles. So you'd have a perfect target segment for you guys, for your company, for your future startup, and to run at least 5 to 7 interviews for each of these target segments, so that at the end of the day, you'd have a summary of at least 30, 40 discussions with potential audience if you're building a B2C product, so business to consumers, and make sure that the information you got is valuable for them. And based on this analysis, then you could also interact with them at the later stages and ask whether the prototype that you would build would be also interesting and useful for them. And you can also validate the user experience later on with them again. So this is something really nice to have. And a quick tip here, if you're building a product for example, not for Moldova, but for other regions, it is also possible to find people in those geographies. Because, for instance, we were building our product not for Moldova. And what we've done first was that we used our friends and family network because, well, you know, Moldova has a lot of expats. So we were using it to find out people in the target audiences we have. So in this case, for example, it was Austria or UK or, for instance, Romania. And then we were just trying to find out people that would fit our ideal customer profile and ask them for a quick 30 minutes Zoom or Google Hangouts interviews, and kind of walk them through this process, explain what is needed, and then they would help us out. So you'd be amazed. People are really open-minded to help with this kind of stuff. So don't be shy and reach out if you want to validate with someone from another country as well. So once you kind of build these user models, the next step is to really analyze your competitors. And before we go into in depth with that, I'd like to just briefly go over the potential business models that you guys might use for your particular company. In the world, there are pretty much 3 basic business models that exist. So it's business to business, business to consumer, and kind of ecosystem B2B2C, or they are more called marketplaces nowadays. So what is, I mean, the B2C is the most simple one, is when a business provides services to the end consumers. There we have plenty of companies that you are using sometimes on a daily basis, like Spotify, Apple, Netflix, and others. You basically have a business model or a pricing model where you'd pay per, let's say, per user, per subscription, or you would pay a specific fee from a transaction that would happen. Or even this type of company could charge, for instance, for ads that the users would see while using their products. So the pricing models might be different here, but the general idea is always monetization on the end consumer, either through the actual money that the customer is paying for using the service, or in other case, when the end customer is the actual product, when they see ads. So for example, Facebook is here a clear example of that, where in this case, the product is the actual end user that is using the platform, and they monetize on ads that are being shown to us. So this is kind of the classical model, probably the most well-known in the world, so I will not spend a lot of time here. But the only mention here is that if you'd have a business model that would be into B2C, and your competitors would be, let's say, in US, UK, or some other geography, and you try to take their business model to other geography, make sure that you, let's say, adjust the pricing accordance to the, let's say, salary incomes and markets that are based in that given country. Because let's say for a product that customers might pay in US for, let's say, $10, and in Moldova, people will not pay for the same service $10, but maybe free. So this is, for instance, Netflix difference, where you would pay, I don't know, in UK 10 pounds, in Moldova you'd pay 5. So this is just something to bear in mind here as well. When it comes to B2B, this model is basically business to business, where about one company is helping out another company to build up specific products. So here it's very important that if you are in this space, you always have to remember that this is a very personal transaction, meaning that whenever you would have a sales team to go there and to try to get the first clients, it probably would be the founder that would do the first sales, because here it's all about network, it's all about understanding your customer base, their actual problems, and building solutions specifically for them. So this kind of, when it comes to B2B products, the best way to start is kind of trial versions that you can explore there, and you can give to your clients, or you can start with some pilots with them. So the most common companies, I mean, like Microsoft, Oracle, Visa, and so on, they're all in the B2B space. And Soltage, like the company I work for, is also in the B2B space, where our clients would be normally banks or lenders that would then provide services to the end consumers. Again, this model is really great. The only thing is here, to get the first clients is very, very complicated, because here the only way to actually get clients is for a pilot that you do nearly for free for the first cases, in order to get the first use case out there and have a good marketing campaign based on each, when you can sign a similar type of companies and then actually get some money out of it. And of course, the marketplaces or the ecosystem players, these companies would typically unite both worlds. So for example, let's take Airbnb. They unite people that have free apartments, and then they unite the travelers or business travelers that require an apartment for a small time frame. And they basically create an environment where these two type of audiences can interact together. This type of business is the hardest, because basically you have to build up two products at the same time. You have to cater to two absolutely different target audiences, which creates a lot more work, but at the same time, it typically pays off quite well. An example from Moldova that I wanted to bring up is Fagura. It's basically a lending company that unites lenders and investors. Again, they build the product for investors that would like to get a better rates, and for potential lenders, that borrowers that would like to get a credit on a better rates that, for example, exist in the market, and they do it in Moldova and Romania. So these are the examples of a merge business model, where they would cater to two different audiences, normally B2B and B2C audience, or in some cases B2C and B2C, but the products would be still very different, and you'd need to build up two products with two feature sets, two business models at the same time, which is very hard to do at the beginning. So again, it is very possible, plenty of businesses out there, but it's just a bit more complicated. So once you kind of figure out in which space or how you would like to do it, you can start out building the actual model. My advice is also to look into a lot in the competition. And here is some of the things that I would suggest you to do for the competitors. First is basically analyze the top apps in the given space that you are. For instance, if you are building a product in the fitness apps modes or stuff like that, in that kind of that segment, you can just basically use some tools like Sensor Tower or others, or just simply look into a top fitness app in the App Store, Google Play, and see what kind of applications exist, and then try to analyze them from two perspectives. First, product perspective and feature set, and second one, business model and other specific business related questions. So also always bear in mind that sometimes not all the applications that are out there in the fitness app criteria would be your competitors. You need to differentiate between several types of competitors, being it direct competitors, secondary, or indirect. So let's assume that basically you have Vita as a juice in Moldova out there, and you are looking into kind of who is your direct, secondary, or indirect competitors. So let's say that because Vita is catering in this case scenario for like everyone who'd like to get juice, the secondary competitor would be Naturalis, who is now catering, let's say, more for like kids juices and stuff like that. So that's going to be like selling to the same product, but in a different way, because their kind of main target audience are kids rather than older audience. And indirect competitors would be in the same group. So they would basically cater to the same target audience, but the product will be different. So in this case, it's just a water. So this is something to always kind of bear in mind, because when you'd be analyzing your competitors, you only have to find out your direct competitors that might be working in different markets, but they would be your exact direct competitors that you have to always take into account when analyzing them from the product perspective or business perspective. When you do the product perspective analysis, you would kind of need to think about several things, but all the questions you should be asking not from your personal opinion, but from the perspective of your user persona. So let's say you have 3 user personas and you think, okay, so why this particular person that is my ideal target audience would use the competitor solutions versus mine? Which feature sets are the most attractive for them? What kind of problem they are solving? And more ideally is to look into what this competitor application is missing and how am I going to be different. This is something that you'd always have to take in mind, because of course, if you're building a similar product that is already out there, no one will actually use it. So this is something to already start thinking when you're analyzing your competition. Also, another thing to always do is to validate with your user personas your assumptions, because you might think that, oh, well, okay, this is how I'm going to be different. This is what I'm thinking. But because, again, you're not building a product for yourself, if you're not validating it with your customers or your ideal target audience, you might mislead or have some issues at a later stage. So for example, this is something that I had as a problem when I was building my first personal finance management application, where we built a product we thought would be perfect, but we didn't validate it with anyone. So we ended up wasting a year of resources building huge product with a lot of feature sets, but which was very hard to use by the customers, and there was no significant differentiation. So we started the second year where we actually started working with our users, starting to validate all our assumptions with them, and then we actually ended up building a great product. So hence why this is a very, very important stage to consider, especially if you are a first-time founder, and when you're considering that that you're building a real ideal product, to always validate it with your target audience to make sure that this is something that they are gonna use. So when it comes to positioning, you always have to understand, okay, I have, I don't know, 5 or 10 competitors in this space, but this is how I'm going to be different from all of them. This is how I'm going to stand out, and this is why this is my unique value proposition that no one else has on the market. It might be because you have this ideal feature that no one have implemented, or you are going to solve the problem of the customers that no one is solving yet, or they're not solving it completely based on the user interviews. And this is something that you always have to kind of start thinking from, because this is going to be something that everyone will ask out, from your customers to investors, to everyone really, because this is from where your business will stand out and be able to actually sell compared to anyone else out there. When it comes to business analysis, when you're analyzing the competitors from the feature set, it's very helpful to start building your MVP, but you can also analyze your competitors from the perspective of how they're actually building their business. So from that perspective, the third thing you have to look into is what is their business model, how they are actually making money. Is it a B2C application where, for example, they are taking a subscription for the customers? Is this some ads that they are having, or what or how they're actually doing business? This is a great way to get inspired, especially if you're building a business from the first time, on how your business model should look like in a long run. You should also look into what geographies they are covering, because if it's a direct competitor and there's not going to be a lot of differentiation between you two and you are trying to sell into the same geography, then there might be a very low uptake in the customers, or there might not be anyone that would like to subscribe to you because, well, basically there is a product out there that already fulfills all the needs of that particular target audience. So you might rethink or revise what unique value proposition you can bring to them. Of course, what is their target audience? Try to find out that as well. Typically, they have some forums, communities. This is a great place to inspire from for the B2C market. For the B2B market, the best case is basically use cases. Everyone from in the business space would always post some business cases with their clients. So hence why you can understand who is their target audience there. When it comes to the market share attraction, this is a very hard questions to find out. For the B2C market, there are some tools that I will show you later how to do it. For B2B, it's really hard because for B2B market space, it's nearly impossible to find out how much coverage one company or another has if they're not a very big player. So this is a bit more tricky question that you can usually find out when talking to the network and the community. And this is kind of more or less the only way to identify what are their potential market share, or doing some specific inside calls with your competition. You can also find this out. And of course, while analyzing them, you should have a small differentiation either in geography, the monetization stream, or anything else to make sure that you are going to be better than them. So these are some of the tools I would suggest you to use. So the first ones are basically more into analyzing let's say where the competitor's target audience is, because it shows you, for example, SimilarWeb is showing you, or SEMrush is showing you what is the geography of a specific website and where they are being used the mostly. Let's say if their traffic is coming mainly from UK, US, or let's say Romania, Ukraine, or whatever. Sensor Tower is showing their kind of up positioning, which is really great for mobile applications. Some of them are paid, but you can get some free tools on their platforms as well. So try to use them as much as possible. In terms of the company information, LinkedIn, Crunchbase, and Oler are kind of the best. Crunchbase would give you the more insights into investments of the company and what kind of stage and shape and form they are. LinkedIn will provide you insights on how big is that organization, how many employees they have, and of course, kind of more descriptive analysis of the company. Oler can provide you more insights from the industry itself and similar companies associated with that particular competitor. And for example, as I said, for the companies that are into B2B space, it's really tricky to identify the target audience or identify how the product is working. So here, the best way to do it is basically a thing called mystery shopping, where in reality, you are presenting yourself as your ideal user persona that will try to buy a product from your competitor. So for example, as I mentioned, Soltage is in business space, so we're B2B company, and for us to find out how our competitors are behaving, what features they have in the latest releases, what kind of pricing they have. The only way to do it is by mystery shopping, where we present ourselves as one of potential customers of ours, and we ask them basic questions to identify with whom they are working, how they are working, what is their pricing model, and so on and so forth. So we would use Zoiper for basically it allows you to have virtual phone numbers from any country in the world. So we can present ourselves as a startup from Estonia or wherever. Zoho allowed us basically to build a landing page with the kind of specific post box or let's say email, corporate email, that we could then use to look more appropriate to that particular business. But at the beginning, we're just using Gmail for that purposes. So here you have to be a bit more creative in the B2B world. It's not as easy as simple in the B2C, but it's also possible to do the analysis and to understand how your competitors are behaving. So at the end of the studies of your competitors, you should have the more or less similar chart where you would position yourself. Let's say you would have your MVP from the perspective of a very niched market that you would cater to, basically your ideal target audience, your ideal segments based on the user personas you have created. And of course, how affordable and useful it is for them, which would be kind of positioning yourself on, of course, the best scenario compared to any other player in the market. So this is kind of something that you'd need later on for pitch decks for investors, but this is also useful for you internally to understand what is going to be your differentiation from any other competitor that there is out there. And this is something that you should always keep in mind when building anything you are planning to build. And here, in terms of the micro niche, this is a very critical point, because whenever you are starting the business, you have to start it as, let's say, with a quite small target audience, because if you try to cover a very large segment or a very large audience, you're not able to provide a really useful or a very differentiative product compared to anything out there. So any large company that we have today started from a very micro niche market. So let's take Facebook, that originally was kind of social platform for universities only. Amazon, that was originally just kind of let's say online book space exchange. So this is something that the companies evolved over time, and then they were covering more and more target audiences. But originally, you should really start small in order to differentiate yourself really well, to find your first early adopters that would be really thrilled about your product, that would be able to promote it really well, and then extend it to more and more features, to more functionality and more target audiences. So this is kind of the basic advice I'd give you guys today. In terms of the niches, another thing that is quite useful to realize is the amazing three abbreviations, which is TAM, that stands for Total Addressable Market, SAM, which is Serviceable Addressable Market, and SOM, which is Serviceable Obtainable Market. You don't really need to learn this three really weird combinations of words, but what you have to understand is the concept behind that. Where basically, like, total addressable market is the entire value of the potential revenue that you could drive from the entire market. The sum is mainly the limits you as a business could basically get in terms of your product, your customers. And SOM is your current target audience, or the market that you are planning to capture right now. So whenever you'd present, really everyone would look into this particular number, and also into SAM as a second obtainable, or let's say available market that you could reach out at a later stage. An example of, for example, Airbnb pitch deck of the same story is they were aiming at the beginning to get the obtainable market for Airbnb being 10 million and a half, nearly and a half. Then they consider that the online trips that currently are being booked is nearly 500 million. And the entire worldwide trips booking is nearly $2 billion business. And they were trying to reach from this point, from the sum to the total available market, to the sum for $500 million company. So this is kind of how you'd present it to investors, but this also gives you a perspective of how scalable is your business, on how many new markets you can go, and how can you actually address that particular points. To count this data is not that simple, but if you already have your user personas in mind, which would give you several key points that would help you to build this data, are the following. Basically, it's geographies, so the countries that you are going to cater for, is let's say the demography, in terms of, we would, for example, have we'll build a product that could be used by all, I don't know, young people from 18 to 35. That would be the demography that you'd, for example, ideally aim for. And then based on these two data, you can already think or try to find the information from either the government portals, the statistics, especially in European Union, there's plenty of statistics on the stats websites around specific type of demography, their behavior online and offline, and the number of total population, based on which you can then drill down and count out your ideal audiences, and most importantly, the addressable markets and obtainable markets that you would have. So these are kind of the most insightful things for you guys to look after, because these are the questions that would basically answer out whether your business idea is valuable and whether it makes sense for you to pursue this idea, or you'd have to change it a bit so it kind of makes sense revenue wise, because whenever you build a startup, it should be scalable enough, meaning that it should really show off potential growth in terms of the revenue and scale, so that it makes sense, for example, for potential investors invest in your idea. So on today's mini tech, or let's say theoretical sessions, we kind of went through the customer segments, your early adopters, problem solution fits. We talked very briefly about unique value propositions and revenue streams. And on the next sessions, you'd learn all the rest of the missing puzzles of the lean canvas. So I can wish you good luck. And I'm now open to questions that you might have based on the presentation.
All right. So let's see questions, but also here I will invite my colleague, Evgeny is here, and he will simulate a bit maybe some of students' questions from our experience on piloting with technical universities. Evgeny, are you here?
Yes, hi, good evening. Nice to see you, Elisa.
Nice to see you as well.
Yeah, as always, I have some questions.
I will let you be in charge more on this topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so actually my question is, okay, at your level, Lisa, at level of your company, how actually you choose the next market to penetrate? Do you use, I don't know, still evaluation of TAM-SAM-SOM, or it's more opportunistic approach? Because you already operate on the international level. That's why, so I'm curious how it's organized at Saltage.
Well, we are kind of 100 people company, and we're already working in all Europe and UK. So right now we are expanding to several markets. How we chose them? Our business is very specific because we're working in the regulated environment. So we work where there is adoption of open banking and open finance regulations globally. Hence why we're going to the countries that have those. So this is kind of, let's say, our first idea here. But for example, when we were considering literally at the beginning of this year where to go next, we had several potential markets, which were Israel, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, US, and Canada. So these were kind of the markets that were adopting the law. The second thing we've done were basically we analyzed the population, number of banks, because our target audience are banks. So population, number of banks, and number of banked and unbanked people. Based on this, we kind of killed several countries that were not fitted, were not fitting within our, let's say, business model and potential market size. So we ditched off Bahrain, Israel, and we prioritized then the markets as we had to also depending on the timeline of the regulatory adoption. So now we're first going to Australia, as the first market, then we're going to Saudi Arabia, then we're going to Brazil, and everything else is left for the next years. But the primary market that later on we will start with would be Canada and then US. So we were taking into consideration several things, and also the competition, because competition is quite strong, for example, in the US, hence why we were leaving it at a later stage of the development. But again, for us, it's a bit different story because it's quite late stage, I would say growth stage startup already, so it's not very applicable for the guys here.
Yeah, I hope it wasn't a secret information about your target markets, because
No, it's fine.
You know, it's online translation, so just to be sure, we will not cut it. Yeah, I would specify my question. So right now, is it different approach how you choose the market, or from the very beginning, or it's pretty similar?
And now it's very different, because at the beginning we were going where our clients were going. So originally, basically, we signed up several clients, and based on what were the markets they wanted to go for, we would help them out to expand and connect the banks they needed there. And this was basically the chaotic approach where we would go when our clients are going. Now we have a very different approach where we actually stopped providing services in several markets because it was not anymore very useful for us, or it was not bringing the revenue, but our expenses were quite high to maintain that particular market. So we would just stop providing the service there.
Yeah, I would say initially you had opportunistic approach, not chaotic,
Yep.
but opportunistic.
Yep.
It's more relevant. Thank you. So we have one question. I think actually we will find this answer later on in our program, but Lisa, the question from Alexandra, how to validate my idea with clients?
Is this clients B2B or B2C? Because this is very important.
As far as I know, mostly right now we have B2C. It's students, okay. So yeah. That's why they focus on things they can
approach. So in terms of how to validate the idea with your clients, as mentioned, you have to build up this ideal personas that you have. And once you have this ideal personas in mind, you are writing down your assumptions in terms of what are their goals, their problems, needs, all the things you have. And then once you have it done, so you already have it created as a user persona ideal audience, you would try to find an actual person that would fit very good this user persona profile. Again, when we just started, we were using friends and family and Facebook Power to find out those users that we needed. And then we were asking them for a 30-minute call. And I would have a list of questions that were very important for me to identify. Open-ended questions, not like, so is your problem this and this, but rather how you are trying to solve, for example, in my case, your current money management for the family, or things like that. So I was trying to ask very open-ended questions and not to influence my clients with the potential half-answered questions that I would give them. So this is quite suggestions of what I do. If you're living in the same city, in the same country, then you can meet for a coffee and ask all of these questions. But if it's in another city or country, just use friends and family to find those type of people and have a Zoom call with them, or like Chrome Meetup, whatever online tool you could have.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, actually, for confirming the methodology that we are going to provide to share with our students during next sessions. Yeah, so that's great. That's people, that person at your level also used such kind of methodology. So, Alexandra, do you explore customer development and problem interviews? And these are tools which are commonly used for startups at the early stage to explore customer segments. Yeah, actually, there is a comment that yes, it's B2C market. Lisa, another question. You mentioned that it makes sense to start small with your idea. Does it make sense to start with at least any entrepreneurial idea, just to start with something, and then or along this way to, let's say, adjust it to the innovations and startups, and to develop this to this field, I would say.
I'm not sure I got the question.
Yeah, the question is that, okay, we have startup academy for universities, so not all of projects I would call like startups.
Okay.
That's why, for me, question again, based on your experience and your vision, what you advise here. So does it make sense to push teams from the very beginning to add some, I don't know, technical innovations in general, or to let them at least start to explore the market with initial idea, and then already to think, okay, what kind of innovations I can add to my product, finding like some problems already with segments, or not to let them go with only entrepreneurial idea, because I separate this entrepreneurial ideas
makes
and
sense.
ideas.
To be honest, I would start just with entrepreneurial, so the easy version, because again, if you would, let's say, if you're just in uni and you're kind of, it's nice to think global. So if you have those kind of ideas, go ahead, please. But if you're just trying to build a normal business for local country, local small business, it's still good, because the same methodology more or less applies both to startup and entrepreneurs. So program is kind of for both. It's just here, for example, some of the things like TAM-SAM and so on would be more local, which would be much easier for you to analyze, because this data you can get, it's more visible. And it's going to be like, let's say, a small version for you. So at later stage, when you would, for example, have a bigger idea, or perhaps you can build up, as Evgeny said, on your idea to think of how can then I now make it global, make it a startup, add up some innovations. You would already have this knowledge and basic experience of how the process should look like, what you should do in order to continue in the flow from entrepreneur to a startup founder, and so on so far. So I would say if you have just a local idea, it's also fine. A methodology is the same. You just get extra knowledge for next time when you want to build a more scalable business.
Great, thank you. Another question, which I faced already several times with startups on the customer exploration, customer discovery phase. So what is your advice? In some with some startups, I had a comment, a feedback that, okay, we did not find a relevant customer segments in Moldova because it's a small market, so we want to go to another market. So my question is, when to understand this difference, that you did not do actually your, let's say, homework for exploring the market well, or there is actually no customer segments and it makes sense to switch to another country, to a bigger market?
Well, first I would start thinking whether there is anywhere this type of segment, because it might happen that you have an idea that no one needs, so you are trying to solve a problem that no one has. So this is kind of my first thing that I would look into, because if it's the case, you are either a genius that is creating an absolutely new market, which probably in the entire world we had like several only, or it's just not something that people need. So this is the first thing. Second one, it's really hard to believe that there is, let's say, a segment, let's assume in Romania, but there is no segment in Moldova. So anywhere there is pretty small segment of people that would use this and that. The benefit of starting local is that you would actually have physical access to some people. You would actually understand their problems. and you would have the capability, if you want to start an actual business, to have all the legal framework to start the company, to have all this framework to actually be able to cater to your customers. If you're trying to build a startup, for example, this was our case. So we were building a startup out of Moldova, but that is working in other countries. It is much, much more difficult because we had to run user interviews. We also had to go there physically to meet them, to talk to them, to understand whether it makes sense or not to work. And it just took so much more time. And also our perspective and understanding of, for example, me coming and living an entire life in Chisinau, trying to sell a product for a UK customer, it was very different because I just didn't understand their problems, and I was trying to impose my idea or to think that like this is the ideal product I'm going to deliver to them, but the reality is they didn't need it, or they have an absolute different needs and habits that I'm used to. So this is something to always bear in mind when you're trying to sell internationally. And again, you'd need finances and capabilities to start a company, like a physical, like an actual office or something like that, which might need someone from the founders to relocate to that country. So this involves the entire new level of complications. And hence why, if you kind of are just more trying to explore and build the first entrepreneurial experience, if you can find an audience in the country you're currently based, it's going to be just a bit easier. Again, for example, the Fagora guys, they started in Moldova, they then expanded to Romania, no problems with that, because they already had some traction, MVP and everything built out of Moldova, and then they moved to Romania. So this is something that you could definitely do. Or if you're trying to build and scale internationally, it's also possible, but then you'd need to actually convince your investor that what you're doing is right and be willing to relocate or have someone there that will help you out. So this is just something that you have to take into account.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. So just to summarize, am I right that so your vision is, at least in one region, so bigger countries and smaller countries, they have pretty similar structure of the society.
Yes.
So that's why if you assume that in Romania there are some customer segments, that means that in Moldova, in 99%, there's also the same segment. The difference only comes when there are different regions, like UK, for example, and Moldova, Romania, whatever.
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
the kind of Eastern Europe, Central Europe mindset, more or less the same. There might be difference in habits, difference in service usage and stuff like that. So you just need to analyze the local markets for that instance. But yeah, otherwise in Western Europe, the specific and behavior really differs per country, not only by let's say in the region. So like what we would deliver for clients in UK is completely different from Germany or France, because just the mindset is very different. Then we can take, for example, I don't know, like it as region, we can take Mediterranean countries, really pretty much the same. So Italy, Spain, Portugal, more or less the same. For example, a lot of companies that want to expand to US, they would start in Netherlands, very similar mindset to US. So yes, that would be like the entry point, and then they would do the US thing, which was quite interesting for us. Yep. So now we're delivering to Netherlands.
Super cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So these are some little tricks that like you can know, but yeah, it's very important to understand your audiences and the differences per market, and most importantly, don't try to cover too many countries at the same time. So one country at a time, it's more than enough, because when you're just starting, there's too many things to figure out, and playing with geographies, cultures, habits of different people, it's just too complicated.
Two connected questions. So what do you think, how much time it's in average enough to enter a new country? So 3 months, 6 months.
Depends on the product.
Depends on the product. So there is no average temperature in the hospital.
Yeah, because it really depends on the industry, type of product, and yeah, like how trained or used people are to these kind of services. Because for example, if you're, I don't know, trying to have, I know my finance industry, so I will send an example here. So if you're trying to sell in Germany, let's say contactless, I don't know, like something like physical devices for merchants, no one will buy, because in Germany people still use cash most of the time. They don't use cards that often. But if, for example, in the UK you would try to sell something for cash, no one will buy, because in the UK no one uses cash at all. Like if you even pay for, I don't know, like for donations with the card. So this is like different market perspectives that are very, very specific. So I would say, like, if, because the audience here is mainly B2C, in B2C it's a bit simpler. If you're doing it only online, and I would say 6 months is more than enough if you're starting off pretty good, and you do your let's say homework in terms of brand awareness, marketing and stuff like that. It's okay. But again, very much depends on the product delivered for you. And also kind of note that a lot of brands are first building their awareness before they would come to the country. So yeah, like being present at some events or some networking stuff where your audience will hang out.
Would you advise to use some local country ambassadors, or you always explore the market by the core team, by C-level?
For
What
the
was your
B2C,
experience and advice?
for the B2C, I will explore first, understanding what's just going on. I would talk with the community, fintech startup community, pretty good, really helpful, a lot of contacts. So from that perspective, I would first do that, and then I'll try to find influencers that will sell my product. So again, for B2C, influencers are your first evangelists that would promote you locally in the country. So I don't know, like bloggers, Insta something, lovers, whatever. So the target audience that they have, if it's your target audience, then it's the best thing to do, because if they promote you via their network, then people locally will buy, will try and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question. I will try to show it. Hopefully it is seen on the screen. So for example, I have a cool idea, but it is relevant for other countries. Is it worth developing and improving this idea and import my product to other countries in the future, or would that be wise exactly for Moldova?
May I ask why it's not relevant to Moldova? So like if you can just write one sentence speech of your cool idea, just very briefly, because it's a bit complicated to answer, because like, I don't know if you're just thinking of what is not in Moldova, but
connected, relevant to this situation. Lisa, what is your opinion regarding keeping your cool ideas in secret? Does it make sense nowadays?
no.
Why? Why not
Um,
afraid?
why it's not? Because like, if it's a cool idea, at least 5 or 10 more people in the world are thinking about it. That's like minimum.
In China, for
And
sure.
yeah, I mean, which you can basically try and think, and they would, because if it's a cool idea, it means that someone else will also think about it, and they would ask questions, they would try to build up on it, they would try to discuss with people, with their audiences, their user personas, to build up on it and to start actually delivering the product. And while you're just thinking or kind of inside you about this thing, they would actually scale up and build everything already. Because it's in the startup and entrepreneurship, it's not about the idea. I can give you 10 now if you want, but it's more about the implementation, the process of what you're doing and how you're delivering it. Because yeah, idea is just an idea at the end of the day, it's not a business.
Yeah, thank you. It's pretty similar to what I would answer to this question. Idea is nothing, execution is everything. So if it's simple to copy your idea and to develop it just only because you write a couple of sentences, that means that you don't have any defense of investments. So and you don't have competitive advantage out of that. So maybe it doesn't make sense even to start with such an idea.
Yeah. So we didn't get any clarifying point here,
Yeah,
but I don't know,
there's
like,
some delay in the
okay.
translation. So and that's why let's wait. Hopefully, we will get this answer. And while we are waiting, I have another one, if you don't mind. So actually, at Saltage, you have let's say a core product, but do you try to keep startup mindset, entrepreneurial mindset inside the company? Do you work with other ideas, directions, develop the product line itself? Or you just try to concentrate and to cover as much markets as possible, and then let's say we will see. What is the strategy?
We are always improving. So we have at this moment in time 2 product lines already, so not on 2. And within 2 product lines, each product line has 3 products.
I would not like to get your product strategy. My question is about entrepreneurial mindset inside the growing
that's
company.
what I was saying, that basically each year we release something new.
Okay.
Probably new product or a new feature that could differentiate as a new product, very specific, very niched. Just because in our case, we're in a very driven market that is just being created. And in our case, we are the frontliners that know that, hey, look, there is a problem. There are literally no solutions, or just 2, 3 companies that would do that. So we are coming up with a solution as well. So in some cases, we can be the first company to deliver the product, and then our competitors would do the same in like half a year or a year. So sometimes we are even doing it as a frontliner. But again, we are very, very into what we're doing, and we always have hackathons on specific topics. So for example, in the next 2 months, we have 2 hackathons that we are participating in with new solutions that we are validating in the market. So again, this is something that we always do. We still keep it as a startup mindset, and we always try to be better for our clients. And all the things that we're doing are based on the client feedback. So for example, if we hear that last 30 clients we talked to always had the same problem, so let's just think how we can solve it out. Hence why it might be just an improvement in the feature set that we already have, or it might be even a very related niche product that we would deliver to them. So this is something that we would normally do, and this is something that kind of keeps us very technical and differentiated from everyone else, just because we can deliver this very specific new things on the market. So we got the answer. It's basically breed a large number of fish in reservations. Not sure if in Moldova. Huh?
I think it's an example.
Yeah. Okay. But as an example, you can start in Moldova. You can deliver it specifically in Moldova as a market, and then you can scale it up to Romania in case needed. You can already, for example, if you, let's say, build a small production that will fulfill the needs of Moldova, you can then do it the same in Romania, because, well, you kind of already have the scale up, you have the structure, you have an understanding of what you need, how you need, what would be the costs, what would be the revenue, and things like that. And then you can just copy paste it in another region, for example, in a country, Romania or wherever, and continue the process there. Again, in this case, you can just kind of have Moldova as a pilot with minimal resources, minimal investments. Make sure you have the kind of return on investment and all the kind of business idea working through, and then basically have the same process in Romania.
Yeah, I think you're a bit muted. So also just to, let's say, to add some points to what Lisa told, is that the idea and why it makes sense to start at your local country is because here let's say the risk and the price of the failure is much less than at any other country. So that's why even with this example with fish, so still in any country people consume fish, so it's not a big deal. But the core question is to understand: does it really make sense to do this business? Is it good enough? And if there is niche, there is a demand on the market, and which is not covered. So if it's already covered in Moldova, most probably it's covered already in another country. So in startup, let's say, and in the modern entrepreneurial approach, according to modern lean methodologies, for example, customer pain is the first thing. So that's why we are not looking at the opportunistic things from the very beginning. That okay, there is no an access to the ocean in Moldova. That's why it will work or it will not. The question if okay, is the consumption of fish in Moldova specifically is big enough that there is a market that we can start a business on? So I hope that we gave a couple of tips. And guys, if you have any other questions, please go ahead. I actually have last, let's say, question from my side, referring actually to this cost of failures. What I face, and I'm mainly working with former former Soviet Union countries. So we have a problem with culture of failure. So I mean that acceptance of failures. So that's why my question: what would be your advice, let's say, for our audience, how to change this mindset, how not to be afraid of failures?
Yeah.
Because in entrepreneurship, it's important.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that like my first experience of venture was kind of at the beginning for the first year a bit of a failure, and we couldn't admit it because we had this amazing mindset. So I think adopting it really fast, it's quite important. And little things that I've started doing is trying to change my behaviors in really, really small things, like being okay saying no, or like saying that you did a mistake in anything related to your life, not only to the business or studies, but anything really, and just to admit that, yeah, I did it, not the best thing ever, but it's all right, I will not do it next time. And even change some little behaviors in terms of what you do normally in life. So for example, for me, it was, I don't know, sitting in the first bench instead of last bench in all my classes. So it's like little things that you would never think of, but this is something that I like everyone would do, and I would do the same. So I would try to do absolute opposite, just to change this mindset of let's say not being able to make mistakes, or not being first in some things or stuff like that. So it was very helpful for me, because as a startup you have to learn fast and fail fast, and failing fast here, it's actually a good thing. So here people would actually say that you did good, because you didn't waste a lot of resources, you didn't waste a lot of time, and you were able to change your mind. So this is something that is very important. And second thing that like I think here would be important for you, so you have this great idea in mind and you do a lot of user interviews. So really try to listen to your customers and your potential users, and be okay with the thing that your assumption was not good or was not accurate. You would just adjust it to the feedback of your audience, and that's very good, because it means that you would actually build a product that is useful for them. And this is little things that you would just need to learn to be okay with, and admit that it is okay to not know everything, and it's okay to fail sometimes, and to adjust your ideas where necessary. And also it is very important, not only for kind of business resources and stuff like that, but as an entrepreneur, it means that you would have a team, and within the team you also have to have that spirit that it's okay to do something wrong, but the most important, you are not repeating it. For example, within our company we have a saying like, don't fail alone. So if you're not like seeing that you are not managing in time, or you don't know something, it's okay to ask questions. There are no stupid questions. It's okay to ask for help, and if you did something that was not done right, it will be just reviewed together with other teammates, and then we just made sure that we add up a process in place so that next people will not repeat or will be able to learn from these processes. So this is something that is very helpful, both on entrepreneurial level as a business, but also as a manager, as an entrepreneur and a leader. This is something that is necessary to adjust as a skill for everyone.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for this great presentation to cover this topic and for sharing your experience. Really, it's I think and I believe in that it's really it's really important to show that so there are really international and great teams and companies and startups coming from Moldova and already operating on the international level to inspire new generation to start doing something completely new, innovative, and not too afraid of failures. So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I hope that our audience liked it. Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, and good luck, everyone. I'm looking forward to see more entrepreneurs and more startuppers and great ideas and businesses coming from Moldova. So yeah, let's build an amazing company and culture and really put Moldova out there on the international market as well.
Thank you. Thank you for this, Lisa. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye. So I hope you liked this session, and looking forward to meet you the next week with our next speaker. Have a nice evening, guys, and see you later.